I should probably start by pointing out that most modern SUVs don't really fit the definition of sport utility vehicle, an automotive designation abused beyond all others, except perhaps GT. The term sport utility vehicle dates back to the early 1970s and the Jeep Cherokee, a shorter two-door version of the Wagoneer aimed at the sportsman. The sport being anything that might appeal to the outdoorsman: hunting, fishing, boating, camping, skiing, trail riding, etc. Or even simply off-roading for the sake of off-roading, something that was quickly becoming a pastime of its own, but in essence was a vehicle for people that needed to get gear to secluded or hard-to-reach locations, not as part of their job, but for recreational activities. And soon, the term would be applied to similar vehicles, some that actually predated the Cherokee, like the Ford Bronco, Chevy Blazer, and International Scout. Even the Jeep CJ and Commando would fit the bill. But within a few decades, SUV would be used to describe every truck-based wagon, no matter the size, number of doors, or purpose. Then enter the crossover, also called an SUV, but not truck-based. Little more than a tall station wagon. Technically, truck-based wagons have always been tall station wagons, even before the first Suburbans of the 1930s. But it was shortly after this time that car and truck design started to diverge, with cars becoming more civilized, roadable, and luxurious, having a lower center of gravity, better ride and handling, with more features and plusher interiors, while trucks would be more utilitarian and durable. They came with more ground clearance, cargo and towing capacity, as well as design inside and out that was more in line with a commercial environment, which is to say, simple and rugged, retaining their full frame and separate body. The car-based tall wagon has also been around for ages, particularly in Europe, often called a van and intended for lighter commercial duty. But it was the Japanese that would bring them to the US in the 1980s as passenger vehicles. Perhaps the best known at the time was the Colt Vista, a Mitsubishi Chariot sold by Dodge. There would be others, including variations of the Nissan Stanza and the Toyota Corolla, and these would be the direct predecessors of compact crossovers such as the RAV4. And these vehicles have proven to be far more successful than their predecessors. Some would suggest the difference between a tall station wagon and an SUV is four-wheel drive, but the tall wagons offered four-wheel drive, as have other wagons, from the Dodge Magnum to the BMW 325iX, and the sedans they are related to have also come with four-wheel drive. Four-wheel drive cars appeared in the mainstream in the late 1970s and early 80s, ranging from the Audi Quattro to the Subaru Leon to the AMC Eagle, which is not only often considered the first crossover, but came in coupe, sedan, wagon, and a hatchback or two. But it was very clearly not an SUV, and four-wheel drive cars have become more common, particularly in the luxury and performance segments, suggesting that buying a crossover for added security of winter driving doesn't really hold water, as a four-wheel drive car with a lower center of gravity is going to provide noticeably better security. What it isn't going to provide, however, is ground clearance. Not that crossovers have enough ground clearance to be used for serious off-roading, but they do have more than most modern cars, which can be handy once the snow starts to stick and build up, or when needing to ford a deeper than usual puddle. Does this make it qualify as an SUV? Well, as I said, more ground clearance than modern cars. But if we go back to the pre-World War II era, cars had ground clearance, something they needed, as the roads they were forced to travel were mostly unpaved, and could be worse than what any modern crossover is capable of handling. Yet the cars of the period did it without four-wheel drive. Although dimensionally, crossovers are remarkably similar to these early sedans, as far as things such as length and height, although the modern crossover is much wider and significantly heavier, not to mention plusher and more civilized. A hose-out interior is currently unlikely. But after World War II, as paved roads became increasingly more common, cars got lower, both in regard to ground clearance and overall height, a trend that is starting to appear in the crossover segment, while cars have gotten taller, nearly to the levels of the early 1950s. meaning it won't be long until crossovers are no longer tall wagons, but simply wagons, or in some cases, more closely resembling hatchbacks. But they have never really been sport utility vehicles, as few have appealed to the outdoorsman, being too soft and too plush and too expensive to take the abuse of a recreational vehicle, and often without much utility or towing capacity. They do, however, seem to appeal as family haulers, as wagons always have, which seems fitting because in the end, that's all they really are. So as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.